to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. I know many of our listeners wonder, how do we shift the culture inside of our organizations? And what do we do when we have, a decently running HR program inside the organization, but we know there's pockets that we really want to pay attention to and grow to match the culture that we want. So we have a special treat today. I have Sam Kloppmann with me, and Sam is a client with Midstate Concrete. And Sam, welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it has been a treat to work with you and your team over about the last 6 months of really implementing, how we hire, onboard, orientate, and impact our culture inside of our organization.
Yeah, it's been a learning process. Coming into Mid-States, I was new to the human resources function. I came out of public education as a teacher and then as a school level administrator for 8 years and a little bit of change there. And walking into, human resources, very similar to school leadership in the sense that you're working with people, you're looking at systems, and you're looking at outcomes and outcomes that matter hugely. And so, walking in at Mid-States, kind of looking at how we were recruiting and how we were keeping people was it was a learning experience, I think, for me, because I was new to it. And I think it was a learning experience for our leadership team as well, because they were getting a different insight at the same time I was. And so we were able to sit down and go through what is the data telling us about our hiring and recruiting and retention. And what that story was telling us is that we had a lot of things that we needed to improve, and we were spending a lot of money with no return on investment. And I think that key right there, because when you kind of crunch the numbers, you're looking at, almost $500,000 a year in just wasted money, right? So the amount of money you spend recruiting, onboarding, and then paying people who aren't productive yet for them to quit before they become productive members of a team is just throwing money out the window. And you're not getting a return on that. So that was kind of the big task that we had to tackle first, was what is going on? Why are we not keeping people? And then how do we find quality, high talent individuals to add to this team to make Mid-States a place that's going to be, for the future, the leader in the industry? That's kind of the goal that I want. That Mid-States will have a reputation that if you get an employee who's been and worked at Mid-States, they will be one of the best employees you'll ever have.
You're not going to lose them, right?
That's the goal. That's definitely the goal. But, if they did, right, if they decided, hey, I'm ready for a new opportunity, I would want our reputation to be that we know that they've been to Mid-States. They've worked with really good teams before. They've had really great training. They know their business. So that's kind of the vision that I have for talent development, that, we want to invest in you to keep you, but also like for our own pride in doing a great job, we want to invest in you so that you're the best, because we want to work with the best, we want to produce the best, and we want to serve people in the best way possible. So, that's kind of big picture, but I'll scale that back and get back to the smaller scale of just looking at recruiting and retention. And when we really looked at the data, in 1 year, 77% of people we hired terminated in the first year. Of that 77%, I think it was high. It was probably 66% left within the first 30 days, and half of those left within the first 2 weeks.
So right there, we knew that, hey, we could make a huge impact in a really short period of time. And I think, Sam, for our listeners listening, and I just want to point out a couple of things here to pull apart, which is really dig into your data. Your data tells a really important story. And so often we don't, take a step back and really dissect the data to say, okay, what is turnover in the first week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60, 90, 6 months, 1 year, 2 to 4 years, 5 to 7. When you break it down that way, you're going to be able to see some key trends. And then you can laser focus, go in and take a look at those. And then to take that one step further is also to look at and say, okay, what departments are actually losing the most once we get past that 90 days? So let's again just talk about the first 90 days.
Yep. So what we found out about those first 90 days is number one, that we were bleeding profusely. And when I talked to the leadership team, that was the big point that I discussed was number one, we have to stop the bleeding. So, I gave them a series of my own priorities for how we're going to go about doing this. And one of them was just, we need to slow down hiring and we need to slow down firing. So for the first couple months, we really slowed it down.
How did that go over? Did that go over like a lead balloon, or did that go over?
So I think the benefit that we had is my supervisor, Hannah, helped pave the way for that conversation to begin with. But two, I think when we showed the data to the leadership team to say, you're losing $500,000 a year, I think that kind of removed some of that hesitancy of like, oh no, we should just keep doing what we're doing. I think the number was so big and they didn't expect it, that it was like, well, no, we can't keep doing what we're doing. That's $500,000 that we're losing. So I think they were ready to explore other opportunities. And then having that data too and sharing it with supervisors. When I would have supervisors push on me and say like, you gotta, hey, this person, fire them. My response was, in the last year, we spent almost $500,000 on failed recruiting. You have an employee here who is fully trained and we keep him for another month, right? Maybe he's not going to be here long term. Maybe there are things we can fix, but we're struggling right now to recruit and you've got a guy who knows the job. So let's just pause on that, right?
Right.
Because the amount it's going to cost me to recruit, train up, hopefully keep them around, we're going to lose money on this either way, right? So
yeah. And I think looking into that too is, all right, so how do we inspire them to actually perform the job? Do they know what winning looks like? And are they getting what they need from you as a leader to be successful?
Yep. So, trying to reframe hiring and recruiting and retention as every new hire we get is an investment for the company. And I think, especially in manufacturing, that's a cultural shift that is slowly taking place, but we're not there yet. So that, I think when we think about traditional like construction, manufacturing jobs, there's almost this attitude that our laborers are just bodies that we bring on board. They swing hammers, they do the task, they go home. They're not really, we don't think of them as like skill building and leadership coaching and training. And so one of the big things too that we started doing is, and I started telling all of the people I interviewed was, I'm not looking for somebody to swing a hammer. Anybody can do that, right? I'm looking for talent. And so I told him, a lot of people don't consider concrete laborer as a talent position, but that's absolutely wrong. Because what you're bringing to my team is innovation and leadership and ability to mentor and the ability to coach and grow. Because in 10 years, when we're looking for a new foreman, or maybe that's 5 years, right? Who are we going to draw on if we're not attracting talent? And so that's kind of the drum I've been beating is we have to find talent who also have the skills of construction, or we just need the right attitudes that we can teach the skills to. Because to me, that's where it all comes from.
Right. So what I love what you're saying, and I'm just going to kind of break this down into a couple steps, is we look at what is the mindset of every individual in the organization. So your leadership team is, hey, are we hiring warm bodies because you need somebody, or are we hiring leaders into the organization that are going to have an impact in the long-term success of Midstate, right? So that's the culture shift. And then during that interview and hiring process, we're planting the seeds for talent pathways through the organization for their growth versus, hey, you're going to come into this position, you're going to be stuck here forever. Good luck, have fun. Right.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing you say and what I've seen, kind of what I've seen you do over the last 6 months is get really specific about the behaviors that you're looking to hire in the organization, and then built that into the interview questions and actually start to empower your leadership team to do those interviews versus HR doing those interviews. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I would love to talk about that.
Yeah.
When we, my ideal is, there are really two things that kind of guide me. Number one is alignment. My vision for an organization is that you're aligned from the top to the bottom. And I say this occasionally, that every swing of the hammer, if I'm a laborer, I should know how that swing of that hammer fits into the total picture of what the vision and the value is for the company. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. We've got a long way to go. But to me, that's where I want to go. And so with that, the second thing is empowerment. I want supervisors to have the capacity to make great decisions in hiring. And then I want human resources to be there to support them when they need that support, right? So part of our process is, we just recently did a training with one of the departments. We're starting small, just focused on one department. And so one of my goals for this quarter was to kind of revamp and revise our interview process. When I came in, things were just fast paced, getting things done. We've slowed down a little bit, so I have a little bit of time to kind of think through, and thinking through, having done the hire program, looking at some of those templates and the structures and the things that we wanted to start thinking about that really helped. But the first thing I did is I went to the supervisors and I just had one-on-one interviews with each of them. And I said, what is it you're looking for? What is the most important thing to you when you see a new hire? What are some of the behaviors or skills that you see that are a good predictor of success at Mid-States? And we had about 5 or 6 questions, and just have the supervisors tell us what is it that you value and what is it that you want. And that was a great time for us to say, and kind of engage them in the conversation of, like, I'm sure as a supervisor, you've looked at some of the people I brought in and thought, like, what the hell is he doing? Right? Because that's the nature of recruiting. Like, I can interview you. I can think you're a really great worker. And then you get out to the floor with supervisors who have no input, and they think, well, what? This guy doesn't know what he's doing. Right? And I'm telling them, this is the best I could get. Right? I'm really excited. This is great. And so being able to have that conversation too, like, if you're not happy with what I'm bringing you, then we need to talk about what I'm bringing you. Right? And that sounds very objective. That's not my attitude. Rather, who I'm bringing you, but.
Right. And I think that this goes back to the job assessment, which is essentially like, hey, what do you need for this job, from the behaviors, the attitudes, the skill sets?
Mm-hmm.
And so for our listeners, if you go back to podcast number 120, we, discussed job assessments in detail within that episode, and going through the hire program. I know that you've done a lot of that, Sam, and that's essentially kind of what I'm hearing is, hey, we're having the conversation about what does each job need, but also what do we need from a cultural standpoint for any employee coming into Mid-State?
Yep. And so I think the good news from the supervisor interviews is that I was not surprised by what they told me.
Right.
That was good news. What was interesting, what was salient, is the most important things that every supervisor said had nothing to do with the ability to work in construction. It wasn't reading a tape measure. It wasn't blueprint reading. It wasn't working with concrete. It was, we're looking for somebody who wants to work hard. We're looking for someone who takes ownership of if they made a mistake, they're going to try to fix it or find a solution. We want somebody that wants to be here and wants to advance. And for me, that was a big like aha moment, if I could put it that way, of like, okay, like in the past, my interpretation of what supervisors wanted was extremely one dimensional because what I had gotten was they just need to be able to read a blueprint and a tape measure.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing for them is that's not the most important. We're looking for the right attitude because I can teach you how to read a tape measure. And so, and that was my attitude from the start. I was like, that's exactly the way I think, but I was under the misrepresentation that they were thinking something totally different. So I think that was a great connection point that, hey, we're all kind of looking for the same thing. We just didn't know we were looking for the same thing. So based on those supervisor interviews, I coded the feedback and created kind of the competencies, what we call them, the behaviors that we're looking for, and then align those to the competencies that we have in the job descriptions. So that was a little bit of a process. Was it perfect? No, we'll tweak it. But so after we got all that done, go ahead.
Because you're getting there, right? Like, and just identifying them, putting them out there allows you to ask interview questions about them, especially those behavioral-based interview questions to really move them through. And I want to create a bridge just for a minute from what you said about, the employees and what they want, especially the tape measure and, the reading of a blueprint is, Sam, I've had the privilege of working with, 10 of your guys that are in the mentor program, and in that mentor program, of course, we're creating this new hire passport for, hey, how do we train a new hire in the first 12 weeks, and week one is we're going to teach them how to read a tape measure. We're going to teach them, we're going to spend that entire 12 weeks to teach them how to read a print. But what we need from them is we need them willing to work with us and wanting to be here. Otherwise we can't train them. And these are your line guys that are essentially saying, yeah, I want to grow. And this gives me an opportunity to grow. And it gives me an opportunity to bring someone else up, which is, they see as such a privilege. So,
and, thinking about when you have high turnover, so when you have new guys cycling in and out and in and out and in and out, as somebody who's a natural mentor, as a leader on a bed, you lose like you don't want to invest. Why would you? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the benefits of the focus on increasing retention is if we're bringing fewer and fewer new people in, then those leaders on those beds are going to want to invest in those people and are going to see the value in taking time to teach them. Where before it was like, I know I'm going to teach this guy and he's going to be gone in a week. So what's the point? Right. So that's a culture killer right there.
You're setting everybody up to fail there.
Yeah, you are. And you can't blame them. Like I would be the same way. So kind of getting back to the interview process, after we tabulated that, we had kind of these competencies and we paired behavioral based questions to each of the competencies. So I think right now we have 8 competencies, and for each area we have like 5 or 6 questions that an interview team could choose from. So with our yard team, I sat down with 2 of the foremen and the supervisor, and we did a training on like, how do you conduct an interview? How does it go? What are the things what can you say? What can't you say? I think that was one of the big things we covered because that makes everybody a little bit nervous.
Mm-hmm.
But then they just had the last, and I scheduled it for an hour. It ended up taking about 90 minutes, which was great because the last 45 minutes was just time for them to go through the competencies, and then they picked the questions that they wanted to pilot. And so we actually conducted our first interview as a team last week. And then debriefed a little bit after, and we're able to talk through like, hey, like this is what I saw. This question right here, it's probably not going to work. We need to reword it because it's confusing, right? So getting them more invested, making it their tool with the goal that like, as we really start to perfect this thing, we're going to build that momentum to roll it out to other departments and increase that buy-in from everybody in the hiring process. So that's kind of the short version of the interviewing development.
Right. And one thing that you just stated was, hey, like we're trying this and then we're revising it, we're trying it and we're revising it.
Mhm.
What I really want everyone to hear is this is a process. It's not a one and done thing, and it is going to evolve over time. And when we can create that process that runs automatically 90% of the time, but know, hey, there's still room to kind of dance within this based on
Yep.
what's there. That's what gives us the flexibility to move from a foundational HR department, which you're creating the foundation, to a transformational HR department, which has an impact on the culture and an impact on the business results and on and an impact on growing every single individual in their role so that they can be fulfilled while they're at work.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. So you're bringing them in, you're getting the right ones in. We're training our mentors so that they can help our individuals to be successful. What an amazing process. And, this has been about a 6-month process, and there's been huge results as far as you've increased your retention in the first, 30, 60, 90 days. You're hiring the right people. You're getting much more collaboration from your leadership team in those key items. So I'm curious, what is a key takeaway that you have for the executives listening into this conversation today?
So I think for me, the key to all of this is that you have to value even what you would consider lower level employees. To me, if you're not hiring for the best at even your entry level positions, you're not setting yourself up for a pipeline to grow in the future. And to me, that's very limiting. So in our culture that we're beginning to shift, thinking about laborers as bodies to do the work, that's some language that we've had to purposefully address to say that we're not saying that anymore. Because when you talk about them as a body, you think about them as a body, and then you treat them like a body, right? And we're not doing that, right? These are talented people that we're bringing in to build our company, So to me, it's if from the ground up, you got to value every position and be willing to develop every level.
Awesome. And what's the takeaway that you have for the HR professionals that are listening in today?
I would say make sure you have your data. Make sure you know what story the data is telling you. And then share that story as you begin to pull other people into the vision of what needs to change. So I think one of the things that has helped us a lot is we're not trying to strong arm anybody into the change that we think needs to happen. It's been very dialogic, if I could put it that way, in, hey, these are the problems we're seeing. What are we going to do about it? And then we're wrapping supervisors into the conversations, into the meetings about strategy, so that they're bought in from the beginning. Otherwise, you're fighting people on the back end, and you've already lost at that point.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Sam. And if you're listening and going, wow, I would love to build an HR department and really have those steps of what do I do each step of the way. We will be opening another cohort of our Hire program, which is a 24-week program, the one that Sam just went through, that really takes you every step of the way from creating an employee value proposition all the way through job descriptions, job assessments, your entire hire process, your swipe emails into the pre-boarding, orientation, onboarding, and new hire buddy program. So with that, anything else you want to add to that, Sam?
No, I think, for the Hire program, there's a lot of benefit to being able to talk to other HR professionals that are in a similar situation sometimes, and being able to talk through hey, this week, this is what I'm facing. And there's flexibility within that program to get feedback from both Tracy and Danielle, but also, the other professionals in the room to help you think a little bit differently about what you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So thank you all for listening in today. We hope to see you inside of our Hire program. And we will, be talking with you again next week on the Talent Optimization Podcast. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.